My name is Braden Patton, and I'm going to present on Theodore Roosevelt. My hope is to explain who Theodore Roosevelt was as a person and to demonstrate the importance and historical significance that he played on the nation of the United States. We'll start with birth and early childhood. Theodore Roosevelt was born October 27th, 1858, in New York City to his father, Theodore Roosevelt Sr., and his mother, Martha Bullock Roosevelt. He had a very fairly normal childhood, lots of time spent playing with his siblings and his cousins, and he loved the outdoors. He loved nature. And this is where his love for nature developed. This love that we see throughout his entire life. It's also important to note that as a young child, he developed asthma, and this physically limited many of the activities he was able to participate in, including public school. He went to public school for a little bit as a child, but he spent the majority of his childhood being homeschooled. Despite this, he had a dream of going to Harvard, and he pursued that vigorously through studies and eventually was accepted to Harvard in 1976. While in college, he had a fairly normal college experience. He boxed, he joined clubs, and he became president of the Natural History Society. It's important to note there are two major events that do happen during his college experience. The first one being that his father died during his sophomore year, and the second event being that he met Alice Hathaway Lee his senior year, who turned out to be his future wife. They were married October 27th, 1880. After graduation from Harvard University, he decided to pursue a career in politics and was eventually accepted as a member of the lower house of the New York legislature. And this is where his career in politics really got started. Theodore Roosevelt had good times as well as bad times, and one of the lowest times in his life was in February of 1884. The 12th day of February 1884, his mother passed away, and this was really hard for him. But to add to his misery and tragedy, less than 24 hours later, his wife Alice passed away during childbirth. And this took a great toll on Theodore Roosevelt. In the background of this presentation, you see a diary entry, and this is actually from the personal diary of Theodore Roosevelt. And the only words on this entire page say, "The light has gone out of my life." And that statement right there, that one sentence, perfectly encapsulates how Theodore Roosevelt was feeling during this time. To grieve, he sought solace in nature. He actually traveled to the Dakotas to work cattle and other livestock, and he spent quite a while out there during this time. Eventually, though, he came back to politics and was offered the job of Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And in 1886, he once again found love and married Edith Kermit Caro. Theodore Roosevelt really loved the United States. He really believed in America above all else. So when the Spanish-American War broke out, Theodore Roosevelt was more than ready to leave his job and join the fight. He thought there was no better way to serve the country and to be an American than to join the fight. So he led a cavalry group, a volunteer cavalry group that became known as the Rough Riders. And they became very well known throughout the United States for their heroics and bravery during the Spanish-American War. And upon his return from war, Roosevelt decided to run for governor of New York. And because of his popularity and his image as an American war hero, he fairly easily won and became governor of New York. During his time as governor of New York, he really stressed the idea of hard work. He inspired others to work hard in order to make the nation great. He often spoke about how it was through hard work that one could obtain personal success, but as well as national success. Hard work was needed to make America great. On this slide, we see a speech given by Theodore Roosevelt called "The Strenuous Life," and this was a speech he delivered in Illinois in 1899. And there are a few quotes on here that really capture the idea that he not only was trying to to portray in this speech, but also during his entire time as governor. And I would just like to read the last two quotes on this presentation. The third quote says, "I preach to you then, my countrymen, that our country calls not for the life of ease, but for the life of strenuous endeavor." And the fourth quote, which reads, "Above all, let us shrink from no strife, moral or physical, within or without the nation, provided we are certain that the strife is justified. For it is only through strife, through hard and dangerous endeavor, that we shall ultimately win the goal of true national success." And this really gave birth to the idea of manliness that we see in the advertisement to the right, where if you wanted to be a man, then you would do what was needed to make America great through hard work and sacrifice. Theodore Roosevelt in 1900 became vice president to William McKinley. And in 1901, when McKinley was assassinated, Theodore Roosevelt became president of the United States. In his first annual speech as president, he presented his agenda and his desires for the nation. And one thing that he was very clear on and very adamant about was that he intended to limit the number of trusts in the nation. He thoroughly believed that trusts were hurting the average American financially, and he promised that he would do what he believed was right to help the average American. And in this political cartoon that we see to the right, we see the great hunter Theodore Roosevelt standing triumphantly over a bear that represents bad trusts. And this was his whole idea, that he was going to get rid of, to destroy these trusts that were hurting the Americans financially. During his presidency, he was a very active president. He sacrificed much, but he expected citizens to do the same. This was very evident in his inaugural speech of 1905 when he was reelected as president. This speech was very much a call to action, to action to the citizens of the United States to make the nation great through sacrifice. On this theme of his inaugural speech was also the theme of his entire presidency, hard work and sacrifice, and that's how America was going to become great on a global landscape. During his presidency, he greatly campaigned to preserve the beauty of the American wilderness. He created 150 national forests as well as 5 national parks, including Crater Lake, Wind Cave, Soli, Hills, Mesa Verde, and Chickasaw National Recreation Area. He really wanted to preserve this beauty for future generations to enjoy. As President of the United States, he also greatly campaigned for women's rights. He didn't necessarily ever specifically come out and say that he was campaigning for women's rights, but he did so through his actions and through some of his words. He really believed that the frontier man was going to make the United States great, that the citizens of the United States needed to go forth and do things that had not been done before. And a strong frontier man needed a strong frontier woman. And he claimed that a hardworking woman could accomplish just as much as the hardworking man. And he often praised women for their hard work and dedication, and believed that it was through the hardworking men and women of the United States that the country would obtain national greatness. After his presidency, he continued to campaign for the rights of the citizens of the United States to govern themselves and the importance of working hard. He delivered a speech called "The Right of the People to Rule," in which he explained that and he pleaded actually for the citizens of the United States to take control of their lives. He very much believed that when the majority ruled, that's when bad things would be avoided. That's when corruption would be avoided. It's only when the minority rule that corruption often is able to take place. There's a couple quotes on here from this speech that he delivered, and all of them basically state the same idea, that the citizens of the United States need to take control of their own lives, and through this idea of the right of the people to rule, the nation would be successful and would avoid corruption. He also, after his presidency, maintained the idea of America above all else. He continued to be very patriotic, great national pride. When World War I broke out, Theodore Roosevelt was actually very unhappy with President Wilson's lack of involvement. He believed that America, the United States, was a great nation and needed to jump wholeheartedly with 2 feet in to World War I. And he believed this so much that he volunteered to lead troops in World War I, but was ultimately denied. But this just shows during his presidency, when he advocated for how great America was and how the nation came above all else, this idea continued after his presidency into his personal life as well. So Theodore Roosevelt definitely left an amazing legacy. He passed away on January 6, 1919, but his legacy of patriotism and hard work is still felt today. He left a legacy of manliness and sacrificing for the country that are still very popular. These ideas are still very popular. And he and what he did will be felt throughout, I believe, many, many, many years to come. These are just a couple of my favorite quotes from Theodore Roosevelt. While researching, I came to the knowledge that Theodore Roosevelt has some pretty dang good one-liners. And I won't read them all, but I'll just read the first two. The first one is very wise. He says, "Power invariably means both responsibility and danger." And I think that's a very mature and responsible thing to say, especially as someone who was president at the time. The second quote I just like. It says, "Don't hit a man at all if you can avoid it, but if you have to hit him, knock him out." I think that's just awesome. I guess he did come from a boxing background, so that makes sense, but still, that's just great. Anyways, this is my presentation on Theodore Roosevelt, who he was and why he was historically important. Thank you for your time.